Welcome back to another edition of our State of the Vikings position by position breakdown. Ben has been doing a phenomenal job giving us some great insight in our current Vikings roster. And today, we round out the defensive side of the ball, talking both linebacker and safety position. Ben, I think it's safe to say both of these position groups are the bread and butter of this defense. Specifically, I'm speaking to four guys. I like to call them the Fantastic Four: Harrison Smith, Ant Harris, Eric Kendricks, and Anthony Barr. What's your thoughts on these two position groups before we dive into this position?
Just like you said, man, they're fantastic. They are the rock for this defense. If there's a strength of this defense, it's right down the middle. You know, got some inexperience on the outside, but boy, we are pretty veteran laden on the inside part of this defense, and really just on the second and third level. You know, they're going to provide all the leadership. You know, the thing I like about all those guys is that we're in an age of social media. We're seeing sort of everything that they're doing. These guys are all working out together. You know, they're all communicating together. They don't just go into the offseason and just kind of take care of their own business privately. These guys are working together. They're pushing each other. And that's a great thing. When you have continuity and you have chemistry and you're not afraid to call a guy out and you're not afraid to get on a guy for slacking off and maybe going through the motions one day in training camp or going through the motions in week 7 of the season when it starts to get a little mundane, you know, they're going to keep each other accountable. And that's what I love about this group. And they're just, you know, all of them are playmakers. You know, I mean, Kendricks being an all-pro and, you know, Barr's smashing heads with everybody. And we got 2 safeties back there that are Pro Bowlers. I mean, it's going to be fun to watch those guys play.
You've kind of hit on it a little bit, but how does that continuity not get comfortable?
Well, first of all, you know, I kind of mentioned this with Andre Patterson. Adam Zimmer has a new job title. He's got a lot more a magnifying glass on him, so to speak, about how he's going to perform, and he's not going to want his linebackers to take a step back. You know, every year rests on its own, and I think this whole defense, because the head coach is always watching, always listening in meetings, he's not going to let these guys get complacent. And I think that's the accountability from top down. And then you look at each position group and the coaches that are in there and the veteran players that they understand what it takes to prove yourself every single day. I think it's going to be easy for those guys because we have such strong leadership.
This linebacker position I know it's a position that you hold deep and well to your heart, just being a former linebacker. But this will position, which you know a lot about, on the depth chart, like, this is a wide open competition. You speak of guys like Eric Wilson, who's made a lot of plays on the defensive side of the ball, Ben Gedian, who's been used primarily on special teams, and then you round that position out with Troy Dye. That, I mean, you've been really high on that guy. So how do you think, like, what can we expect from that will linebacker position? Because that's some great quality competition right there.
Well, I know this is semantics, but I look at this position, I call it the Sam position. Now, you know, I think, you know, you can go back and forth, but the way, and listen, I was always taught for many years, kind of like you, that position that goes towards the tight end, that goes to the call side, is the will position. It's always been Will, Mike, and the Sam. And I've played the Sam position. But then all of a sudden, Leslie Frazier comes into my life, and he goes, guys, what are we doing here with these calls? He's like, we do everything that makes sense. Like, S stands for strong. If we call blitz, we start with an S number because it's strong. Mike is middle. That's pretty easy. And we do everything with W's for weak side. Well, why would we put the linebacker that lines up to the call to the strong side, the will linebacker? That's the Sam. It goes Sam, Mike, Will. And I'm like, holy cow, genius. Like, you just blew my mind. It's amazing what we're conditioned to. So I'm going to call this position the Sam linebacker because this position lines up to the call, to the tight end side, and he's on the strong side of the defense. So, Eric Wilson.
Oakland 30% on third down. Very high snap to Carr. He's sacked by Eric Wilson.
I love this guy. I think that he is aggressive in the way that we need attitude on defense. He's downhill. He's physical. The problem I have with Eric Wilson is I think the more snaps he got defensively as a true starter, the less production that we saw from him as a player. And at times, a little exposed that he got particularly in the passing game. So I do feel like this position is up for grabs. And you get a guy like Troy Dye, who probably fits the modern NFL, the transitioning NFL, a little bit better than an Eric Wilson. Leading tackler at Oregon for 4 years. Tough as nails playing through injury. Rangy, fast, athletic. Not a thumper, not necessarily a thumper, but when you put him in that position and he's covered up by the defensive lineman, and that position, that Sam linebacker position, by nature doesn't have to take on a lot of blocks. And you allow that guy to run around and use his instincts. Troy Dye is all instincts. He could be making splashy plays from sideline to sideline and could possibly push Eric Wilson for that starting spot. Ben Gedeon, you mentioned him, seems to be one of these like downhill A-gap players, a little bit undersized, probably has the skill set more for a middle linebacker, but maybe doesn't have the size and strength to always take on some of these blockers. So he's just kind of in the fold as this kind of a rotational special teams type player again this year. But watch out for the competition between Eric Wilson and Troy Dye.
And two other guys that we didn't hit on, DeMarque Gates and Blake Lynch. I mean, just based off of what you're saying, like this could be like a 5-man competition. So what can those other two guys bring to the table? Yeah,
well, Gates, I wouldn't be surprised if Gates, flashes a little bit too. He's an aggressive downhill player as well. He's not quite what you'd think as a pass guy. Made a lot of plays in the AAF, the XFL, made a ton of plays at Ole Miss, and he knows how to play football. He just needs to be given another chance to fit in the right system. And maybe, right now they have him as the number 2 Mike linebacker. Maybe Mike linebacker is not his position. He's aggressive enough to where, possibly he could play behind Anthony Barr's position on the will side, where you do have to run downhill in that bubble side and take on blocks. You have to take on fullbacks. You got to take on exposed offensive guards and offensive tackles. Those guys getting a free release right here. He has that mentality to do that. Now, a guy like Blake Lynch out of Baylor, very versatile. This is a guy that you would put in that raw category. Only played 2 years of linebacker in college because they shuffled around. He's so athletic, but yet didn't really have a spot. He played on offense. He played on defense. He played 5 different positions in college, and he still made plays. So this guy gets football. He understands football. So I could see him challenging for any spot in the number 2 position just because he gets it. He knows where all the X's and O's go.
And just moving on to this further back on the defensive side of the ball, the safety position. Harrison Smith, the ultimate Viking. Resume speaks for itself. I personally think that with his level of play, he's going to be getting a gold jacket one day. If you team him up with a much-needed signing of, franchise tag of Ant Harris. We all know how important that signing was. For those two guys, you can't put the success of the defense solely on those two guys. But what can they do better to make this defense better on the back end?
Well, I think, for both of those guys, I think it comes down to just takeaways.
Batted at the line of scrimmage, batted back and picked off. Pick 6, Anthony Harris, pinball style. Under pressure, intercepted at the 32 by Harrison Smith.
Harrison did a better job of that last year, and Harris obviously did a really good job taking the ball away. But I think if they want to make their mark and truly, shout out to the NFL that they are the best safety tandem in the NFL, they got to start picking the ball off a little bit more and a little bit more consistent. And we know that Harrison can come down the box and thump you. We understand that Harrison is sort of the trigger to this whole defense. He's the disguise guy. He's the guy that's down the line of scrimmage, and he triggers the defense upon his movement about how guys go, where the blitzes are coming from. So he's vitally important for things that don't happen on the stat sheet. Those things won't go away. But I think when it comes to production things, the things that the fans see, if they could pick off a few more balls between the two of them, man, you could have 2 all-pros back there.
Is it too far-fetched to say that Ant Harris will lead the league in interceptions again this year?
No, I don't think so. And you look at some of the interceptions he had last year. I wouldn't say that he freelanced it, but he definitely used his instincts to make plays. There are a couple plays, and one in particular where he picked off Aaron Rodgers, where he was supposed to be deep half of the field.
Rodgers on 2nd and 18. Look at the time, and that ball is was picked off by Harris.
Read the situation perfectly and knew, hey, I can jump that guy. I can jump that guy going across the field. Even though I'm going to abandon my position, I'm going to go be a football player and make a play. Rodgers wasn't thinking he was going to be there. Rodgers read the defense perfectly. He didn't adjust for a guy that's going to go out there and just be instinctful and going to make a play. If he can do that with more consistency without hurting the defense, man, he could have a hell of a year.
When you move down the depth chart, you have 3 rookies who will get their number called a lot this season. 2 in particular who got drafted, Brian Cole, Josh Metellus, and then Miles Dorn, undrafted free agent. What can we expect from those rookies this year?
Well, again, sort of when I talked about the defensive line competition, we got 2 guys in Josh and Brian that are 2 different types of players. Brian out of Mississippi State, taller, more of a true safety. He's 6'2", 215 pounds. So big, thick guy, probably more of a safety type of look, and he could be that guy that's the true safety. Now with Josh, he's shorter in stature, more stocky, more thick, but he really proved himself at the Senior Bowl because when he was at Michigan, he was a 3-year starter at Michigan, they had him play cornerback, slot nickel, and both safety positions. So he played 4 positions in the secondary while he's at Michigan, and he can do it all. He got challenged at the Senior Bowl. They said, hey, go out there and line up against wide receivers in a true cornerback situation, and he did really well. So versatility wins out all the time. So if you have to rank these guys right now, who's the number 3 safety going into training camp? I'd say I'd have to go with Josh Metellus.
Lastly, a few seconds ago, I told you put on your coaching hat. This time, I'm going to tell you to put on your former linebacker hat. Being a former linebacker, you've been in a situation like this where you had to trust younger guys. So as a Barr and Kendricks, as a linebacker, what do you think what was going through your head, and what do you think is going through Barr and Kendricks' head, knowing that they have to trust in the younger guys in order to be successful? Well,
I think that they just have to put it out there, and they have to be upfront with these guys about what the expectations are. This is not a season that you can afford to take time to get going. You, in the best way possible, no matter how many limited practices they have, you have to trust and you have to push these guys to be ready. Not only for you yourself as a veteran, because even as a veteran, I still needed some reps. I still needed, you still have to get out there and see things and have your brain connect with your eyes and your brain to tell your body to do something and process so quickly. That does take a little bit of repetition to get back into things. So not only to take care of yourself as a veteran, but you have to push those young guys and say, hey man, no excuses. We have 0 excuses, because if we want to hit the ground running when the season starts and we got a tough game number 1, you can't afford to lose that game and fall behind the 8 ball in the division right away. Unfortunately, you got to put the screws to these guys and say, throw your youth and your inexperience and your lack of reps out the window, because we're all in this together and you got to step up.
Well, what I would expect is for fans to head on over to Vikings.com, because you've missed any of these position-by-position breakdowns on the current Vikings roster. They're all on Vikings.com, so make sure you check those out. The Vikings Entertainment Network has been posting content on a daily basis to keep you guys up to date on what's going on, so make sure you stay tuned. As always, it's been a pleasure, Ben.